Hey guys, it's Kat again. Another little piece of video here talking about Game of Thrones and some background, real history, myths, legends that are playing out in the Game of Thrones. George R. Martin, he's really great at pulling all of these together. I mean, you could talk about that he took these things out of history, but he mashed them together and made them make sense in his story. So really fantastic. There's a bunch of other folks out there doing a bunch of videos. These are really just me trying to put out some ideas because I've gone around to all these videos and I was watching them and suddenly I was putting all these remarks on there and they were so long I thought, Jiminy Crickets, I ought to just do my own damn video and put my ideas out there. So that's what I'm doing. Oops. Not very good quality. And I'm not a very good videographer, so, watch these other dudes if you want some really well-produced stuff. This is really about ideas. So shout out to the Game of Thrones Academy guys, Civilization X, Emergency Awesomeness, Rawrist. You can't go wrong with watching those folks. They're really much better quality. So this is just to fill in the gaps and or expansion of things that have probably already been talked about. So I talked about Ragnarok and I talked about the idea of the long winter and the long night in Norse mythology. But in this case, I really wanted to spend a second and talk about the real life long night and long winter. So Gil and Itamar, again, talked about Gilgamesh and the Great Flood, and it was 40 days and 40 nights, blah, blah, blah. But specifically, it talks about the long night and the long winter. And Ragnarok talks about these things coming. And in reality, there really was a period when this actually happened, when there was what people considered was the long night or the long winter. And this period was called the Dark Ages. You might have heard of this. This is Dark Ages before the Middle Ages or medieval times. So historically and scientifically, people have said that there was a period of time when we had like a mini ice age, and this actually corresponded with the period after the Roman Empire fell. So if you listened to my first video or you've looked at Game of Thrones Academy and their discussion about the Roman Empire and how it looks like certain aspects of Game of Thrones. So the Roman Empire collapsed. And after it collapsed, the period right after that was called the Dark Ages. And why was it called the Dark Ages? Well, it wasn't literally dark. Well, it was darker, longer, but I'll talk about that in a second. But really what it talked about was that when Rome existed and it had expanded itself over much of the known world, there was Pax Romana. So the Pax Romana was the peace of Rome. And through its military and its laws, it established order in many of these areas, and there was some relative peace. I mean, obviously in outer areas there were still the tribes to deal with and things of that nature. But along with that were all the roads. Gil and Itamar talk about that in the Valyrian with the Roman Empire. There were all the roads that led to Rome, and there was great trade, information. So not only things and resources and people came on these roads, but information traveled to and from Rome. So knowledge was going back and forth. And obviously the Romans had done things like built aqueducts and baths. And they actually had a machine that measured out miles. There was a great number of things that Rome did. Sewage systems, latrines. So knowledge existed in the Roman Empire, and it actually advanced civilization considerably. But then Rome fell. Boom. Knowledge retracted. Knowledge retracted into only a few places like monasteries, where groups of monks acted as clerks and copied down like Greek treatises and medical treatises and the Bible and other books. And these books were super valuable. Now that Rome had fallen and knowledge didn't travel very much and people really weren't that educated anymore. So, the noblemen, even very few learned to read, write, or do math. That was a very small class of people, most often clerks or monks out of these monasteries. So knowledge shrunk. And this is why it's called the Dark Ages. And knowledge was contained in only a few places. It's kind of like in the Game of Thrones, how the Meisters are pretty much the arbiters of knowledge, and they're only in, even though they are in certain houses, noble houses, there's this one place, Old Town, in the Citadel, where they go to learn and study, right? Just like in the Dark Ages. So that is the long night in real life. One aspect of it is the Dark Ages. So the other thing that happened during this period of the Dark Ages was this thing called the mini ice age. So in real life, right as the Roman Empire was falling, and again, Gillen and Tamar discussed this, so a bunch of volcanoes were going off. And this had happened several different times throughout history. And when these volcanoes had gone off and thrown massive amounts of ash into the sky, it essentially had a effect of climate change. So multiple volcanoes went off and destroyed Pompeii and a couple other cities, and not just in the Roman Empire. The Mayans actually and the Aztecs have some additional history of volcanoes that might have gone off around there. There's also the giant crater near a city in Mexico that everybody believes was a asteroid that came down and smashed into the earth maybe sometime near about the time that these volcanoes were going off, and again threw up a bunch of dirt, debris, and ashes into the sky, and blocked out the sun. Long night. Blocked out the sun and affected climate change. And one of the things that happened during this climate change, this mini ice age during the Dark Ages, is that in fact winter was longer. Winter was longer and the growing seasons were shorter. So what happened was that people lived a Hobbesian life, short and brutish. They died of starvation and disease much easier. Society had broken down into chaos and small tribes again, right? No more Pax Romana. So, they couldn't grow as much food. The growing season was shorter because the winters were longer. People starved. They fought over resources considerably. And it took quite some time, but eventually it slowly gained some order. It was called the feudal order. So the tribes were slowly taken over by these feudal warlords who gained control of certain areas and started building castles, and eventually, became the concept that we see in Westerosi right now in Game of Thrones, the medieval period where these warlords had gained power over larger areas. But so there it is, the real life, not related to Noah's Ark and the Great Catastrophe Apocalypse, but the real life long night and long winter, which is the Dark Ages and the mini ice age. So thank you very much. I hope that gave you some information and made you think about where the Game of Thrones is going, or how it got there, and what their little history was. And hope to see you again. Bye.